program might contain strong language. If you think you may be offended, switch off now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Inside Mojo podcast, where each week we're taking a look at another key moment in YouTube's evolution through the WatchMojo lens. I'm your host, Rob, and with me, as always, is WatchMojo's co-founder and CEO, Ashkan Karbasfrooshan. How are you today, Ash?
Very good. This is not vodka. It's just water.
I'll take your word for it. So this week is episode 11. We have actually planned 20 episodes for this series, and we're halfway done. So how's it gone so far in your view?
It's been interesting, but I realize I'm a bit in arrears with regards to the voiceover of the actual documentary that spawned this podcast. So I have a bit of making up to do, but
Is that on schedule? When is that expected to come out?
Well, I mean, I could do the VO of like a 90-minute documentary in like a couple hours. It's more the editing. So I will be emailing you and asking you some questions about that. But yeah, the material is done. I just have to record it. I got to do the work there.
For sure. Happy to help. I'm sure it'll come together
Yeah.
easily enough.
Yeah.
So today we are talking about Vanity, from Expos to Yankees, PR, Pewdiepie, Tom Holland, and the Vidcon keynote. So there's a lot to cover, but let's jump into it with a bit of industry news first. Apparently, Roblox and YouTube have announced a new partnership. What does this mean?
So as I've said, if any company, if somebody asks me like which company reminds you the most of early-ish YouTube, I'd probably say Roblox. Similar UGC platform that started off like a bit weird, what is this? And then the users who were on Roblox, most of them probably maybe not as engaged as much as they were, but they've probably stayed with the platform as it professionalizes. And now you have like marketers joining the platform. And yeah, so what does this mean? To their credit, Google, YouTube, pretty smart. Well, Google more than YouTube. So Google will be tapping into Roblox's platform to reach that audience. Roblox already does a good amount of ad sales. Most of their revenue comes from Roblox. But Google, being the most successful ad company in the world, will be able to benefit itself, benefit its clients. It'll obviously drive incremental revenue to Roblox. So I love it. I own shares in both companies. It goes to show, like, I thought maybe eventually a Microsoft or Google would just outright buy Roblox. Possibly even Amazon. They could see it as related to their Twitch platform. No, I like it. I mean, I'm not on Roblox myself, but I do think it's it's a very, very promising business, and this is a smart move for both.
And just for more context, what they're doing is they're granting rewards for players in Roblox for watching ads through Google AdSense.
Yeah, which is a bit not taboo, but like historically, Madison Avenue doesn't like it when you incentivize audiences to watch ads. Makes sense. You don't want to pay people to sit through ads because it creates like, weird incentives. But, given the nature of Roblox, it's not crazy, I guess. And again, it just goes to show how Google has built this awesome ad platform that they can monetize everything. They could literally, it's always a call to serving an ad for them. Everything is an ad inventory. It's crazy.
Do you think that we will see more of this type of thing, particularly like in the gaming realm? I'm thinking like maybe Fortnite or other big platforms that host a lot of gamers might leverage something similar.
Yeah, so Google, to their credit, does a pretty good job of weeding out like fraudulent ad activity. So I think that like Google can do this and give assurances to Madison Avenue that maybe some others wouldn't. But I also think the same way that Google revolutionized ads first with search advertising and then through YouTube with skippable ads, TrueView, giving the power to audiences to sit through an ad or not. I do think, younger audiences, like my daughter who's 14 now, and she was like 4, 5, 6, when she would see an ad and dad couldn't skip the ad for her, she'd lose her mind. And that was just like a change in behavior that to our generation was crazy. We sat through the stupid ads. We had no choice.
Well, we enjoyed commercials, the good ones to a certain
Good
extent,
ones, yeah.
even. And
We
it
made fun of
provided,
bad ones, but yeah, no, it's a different behavior basically.
yeah, it provided a good bathroom break too, in the middle of your favorite show. And then the shift to subscription kind of like erased that, but we're moving back into that direction because even some subscription services now have tiers that include ads. So is this a return to kind of like the norm that we used to have?
Yeah, I mean, as we've talked about it, the whole Avod advertising video on demand is a much bigger opportunity than subscription video on demand. But I think what you're alluding to, I mean, I'm not saying this is a commie there, like these are greedy capitalists. I think what these companies realize is there is like skimming the market. Yeah, there are some people who would pay, I mean, Netflix is now $25, whatever it is. There are some people who will pay $20 for a ad-free environment on Netflix. But many people don't want to pay that. So they're like, oh, what if we had a lighter ad load and that's only $10? So yeah, I think you're going to see that kind of hybrid pricing model more and more for sure.
All right. Well, before we get into the meat of today's episode, we have a poll that just went up on the WatchMojo YouTube channel, and we want to know, how do you define success? Basically, how do you know when you've made it? Is it when you've got money, when you've got fame or notoriety, when you've got haters after you, or when you feel personally satisfied? So weigh in with your thoughts there on our YouTube channel, and we'll revisit that at the end of the episode. So last week you mentioned a few books. So let's use those to set the scene for today's episode.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, we're not saying anything new. Reading books is a tremendous source of wealth of knowledge and whatnot. I think that goes without saying to, like, if you are a historian or like an English major. I think business people and entrepreneurs underestimate the value of business books, not just like Built to Last, the habits of highly effective people. Some of the most rewarding books I've read are biographies of famous, business builders, entrepreneurs, whether it's The Chief on William Randolph Hearst, whether it's The Publisher on Henry Luce. Yeah, I mean, those books are kind of like blueprints, When I tweet or write on LinkedIn, sure, it's therapeutic, sure, it's helpful to gather my thoughts. And as you could laugh, it's fair, but it's interesting to have like unfiltered thoughts from a builder. What did he or she see when they made these decisions? That's kind of rare, like history. We don't really have firsthand knowledge of what was William Randolph Hearst thinking, what was Rupert Murdoch thinking. So I always thought it would be pretty cool to leave that eventually for others, as much as it's helpful for me. Anyway, but yeah, these books are, they really, really helped me. And yeah, like mid 2010s, I remember vividly reading the Publisher, which was on the history of like Time, People, Sports Illustrated, Fortune. And yeah, I was like, you know what, maybe I'm getting a bit complacent. Maybe I'm getting a bit in my own routine. And I was like, look, I'm like, if you as a founder aren't like ambitious anymore, or you feel you've reached a certain level of success, because sure, the first 6-7 years were really hard, and you don't have that stamina, you don't have that drive, that fuel and fire. Yeah, I was like, maybe you should fucking step aside and pass the ball to somebody who's going to come and take some shots on that, aim for the fence. But then I was like, no, I still have that fire and fuel. And I was like, as we've covered, I was like, I just have to get out of my comfort zone to push the team without it seeming like you're not appreciative or have gratitude, just for them to realize if you don't innovate and adapt, you're going to fucking die.
Right. It's as simple as that. So good part of what we're talking about today is around 2016, when WatchMojo was kind of like at the apex of its lifespan in terms of viewership, maybe influence on YouTube. I'm not sure how you would define this period, but we're talking about a period of time when huge names like PewDiePie were acknowledging WatchMojo and actually roasting us. So how did you kind of interpret that when you saw the type of reception that we were getting and the way that people were talking about us?
So let's watch it then.
Yeah! Finally! It finally happened. My favorite channel. My favorite channel finally did a video on me. I'm talking, of course, about WatchMojo. If you don't know WatchMojo, that's like you don't know Jesus. WatchMojo, the greatest top 10 channel of all time, with such classic titles as Top 10 Anime Chefs. If you think I've been out of ideas, WatchMojo is on a whole new level of out of ideasness. Top 10 greatest sandwiches of all time. You can't beat that.
That's pretty amazing.
That's pretty amazing. So I actually brought this up very quickly, as you said. This June 21st, 2017, I was on a plane headed from Montreal to Anaheim, LA, LAX, going back to Cali for VidCon. So again, going to VidCon, the mecca of this racket. And, you know, somebody was like, Pewdiepie, basically. And I was like, this is amazing. You know, he's roasting us. He's being sarcastic and all that. But it was amazing. I loved it. I mean, at the time, you know, Pewdiepie was the king. You know, he was the Mr. Beast before Mr. Beast was there. No, and it's great. I mean, if people don't talk about you, if people aren't, you know, I kind of took offense when you're like 2016 was WatchMojo at Apex. I'm like, let me think about this. But no, it is true. Like 2014, we were the 7th largest channel in the world. Not just because we were crushing it, but because like nobody was on YouTube there, you know? No, I mean, it was a bit of like, again, like we've always been like in our own little bubble in the trenches based in Montreal, you know, like it's funny, the parallel, like when I started my career, like New York, there's so much noise. And like the YouTube creator community was like out in LA. And it was like a therapy hour where there were all a bunch of like, not in a bad way, like insecure creators who were all like rejects of Hollywood. And I used to tell them, like, get over this insecurity. This is the future. What do you care about Hollywood? And I was like, yeah, this is like crazy town. I don't need to be here to build this business I'm building. But it was nice that we weren't just in a vacuum, you know, that like the so-called top channels were like, you know, roasting us, which was what you wanted, right? Because that was like validation that you had made it, so to speak.
I don't know if you guys ever made a T-shirt that said, "If you don't know WatchMojo, you don't know Jesus." But that would be
not bad, yeah. And I mean, considering we did one with running out of ideas since 2006, we probably should have done that.
That might have been a missed opportunity.
That was a missed opportunity, yeah.
So VidCon 2016, you were there as a speaker. Was this your first speaking engagement as a leader?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because VidCon had already been around for a number of years, and again, like I wasn't, you know, into the. I'm not want to take knocks at anybody, but I remember like there was a site called Mashable, and their founder Pete Cashmore was at every fucking conference. Like every time I was somewhere, which was like 1 out of 10, he was there, but he was at every other one. And I always used to make fun of that, like people that were always at every conference and like thought leaders. It was such bullshit there. Like fucking all of these things are big boondoggles and waste of time. But you do need to get out there. And so, yeah, so VidCon was a bit of a, like it was an anomaly in that I hadn't been. I'd be going to other conferences and speaking, but it was like, to their credit, VidCon had built this kind of franchise as, you know, the gathering place of YouTubers and YouTube creators. So went down and, you know, started going every year, every other year before COVID hit. And what was cool is when they asked me to talk about the history of YouTube for YouTube's 15-year anniversary, that actually in some ways meant more because I was like, oh, you know, they acknowledge that we've, aside from WatchMojo, I'd written about the industry for Media Post, TechCrunch, yada, yada. So they were like, this is a guy who could talk about the evolution of YouTube.
Yeah.
So it was good. But to be honest with you, like I never really give 2/3 of 0 Fs about this stuff. Like, I'm not saying that to be like cool. Like, I do find like none of these things matter. You know, like I think we've lived in 20 years of like bullshit with a lot of cheap capital available and VCs throwing money at people. But it's like, if that Teddy Roosevelt citizen in the arena, the man in this, on the stadium, like, it's not these conferences. Like, who gives a fuck? You got to be in the trenches. Like, I built the business literally like behind a computer, like firing off emails. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like engaging with fans or reading up on what we should do. But it's a balance act. I also think as an entrepreneur, you could totally be, like totally MIA from these events. But it is a bit of vanity.
You mentioned that in the late 2000s, YouTube was kind of like a pariah, but at this point, it was, the belle of the ball, so to speak. And having these conferences and like, there's just a lot of like fanfare around it. So where was the platform at around this time?
So yeah, so like I remember 2000, even 11, 12 writing that YouTube was no longer a pariah and it was like a leading platform, but I mean, nobody listened. It was like a lot of executives who would be like, no, this is the way things are. And I was like, yeah, you're clueless, but okay, you're entitled to your opinion. So yeah, I think it was a bit, I mean, I don't want to make a crude analogy. So let's use a young teenage son you have. Let's say you have like this teenage son who's like 15, 16, and you're like, wow, this young lad is a prodigy. Like he could throw 95 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour slap shot, can throw 80 yards down the field. Like, as a parent, you look at it and you're like, this kid is going to just destroy it. But the kid itself may not recognize that. That's the way YouTube was, right? Like, I was like, come on, like, this is media. I mean, I would go to VidCon. First of all, I thought the whole concept of, I can't believe I'm going to go on here. I thought the whole concept of VidCon was jailbait, like just a disaster waiting to happen. Because it would be a bunch of teenage girls, scantily clad, totally inappropriate. But I was like, okay, kids these days, this is how they dress. They would be roaming around, running after their favorite creators. But then you also invite all these like middle-aged men largely to come to this conference, drink, socialize, but basically all hang out at the same kind of Anaheim Convention Center.
It's like a Comic-Con kind of like fan convention mixed with a business.
Yeah, but the Comic-Con when I spoke, it was like I mean, I'm not knocking, these are our fans, but it was like grown adults who were fans of stuff. So you had like the 25-year-old dude and the 24-year-old girlfriend dressed like Star Wars. Okay, fine. But VidCon is like 14, 15, 16-year-old girls running around screaming. And you're like, this seems like a bad idea on many, many levels. But again, what do I know? Yeah, I don't know. But so VidCon was really like an eye-opener for me. Because I was like, none of these kids give a fuck about TV or movies, and you could see what's happened now where even all of Hollywood is like, yeah, like the future is YouTube. And I'm like, yeah, it's been saying this for a decade. But VidCon really captured that well, and then it got acquired by Viacom, Paramount, and then COVID hit, and you could argue, is it relevant today? Probably not as relevant as it used to be, but it was a microcosm of this whole YouTube revolution.
Just to wrap up the topic of like vanity, a big moment was when Tom Holland kind of, he was a bit starstruck in front of Rebecca, the WatchMojo lady, because he'd been a big fan of the channel for years. And that got a lot of people's attention because that was kind of like a demonstration of how there's this entire generation that grew up watching WatchMojo, including some big celebrities too. So how did that feel?
Rebecca.
Hello, Rebecca.
WatchMojo.
I love WatchMojo.
No.
I'm always watching the top 10 things. Always.
Welcome to WatchMojo. Yeah.
That's me.
Oh, no way.
Oh, no
You
way.
narrated?
You do the...
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Can you do the
know
intro for us?
Right now.
Oh, really?
Please?
I've never done this in person. Welcome to WatchMojo.
No way. Oh my God.
This is so ridiculous.
I love your show.
I love your show. I mean, this was, I was a bit more like taken aback by the Pewdiepie thing, even though I'm not like into YouTube creators, but I kind of was like, okay, we've been like kind of building this thing on YouTube. And at the time, like the king of YouTube is roasting us. So I was like, that's pretty cool. This though was again, like just another example to the team. Like, well, why are we surprised? Like, this is great, super flattered, but we're like, here's an actor who had to live and breathe these characters and this fandom and this IP. Even if it was just for research, he would probably come across our content and watch it like any other, young whatever, like young male in his demo. And then you go with like, well, yeah, everybody that grew up watching YouTube, they came across our content. But again, it just showed to the fact that we weren't like this New York or LA based team that took this stuff for granted. Yeah, and obviously this I think comes up more when we're in meetings or if people anecdotally want to be like, oh, it's super cool. It is interesting though, that for all of PewDiePie's might, accomplishments, and I'll always respect any storyteller or entrepreneur, like that seems more like fleeting. It seems like flash in the pan. Will people remember PewDiePie or not? But the legacy, the value of legacy media and these, IP like Spider-Man and these traditional actors, to me, that was the interesting thing, that it still carried such a clout and such an importance. And it goes to show that even though everybody is like, Hollywood is dead, it's all about YouTube, it is telling, though, that this still carries a lot more weight, years after the fact than the PewDiePie one.
Yeah, I want to follow up on the comment that you made about the YouTubers' insecurities about not kind of being locked out of Hollywood and how, well, like, what does that mean exactly? How has the landscape shifted if Tom Holland's influence will have this longer lasting impact than, say, PewDiePie's, even though he was like the #1 on the platform?
Well, look, I mean, I think we're at a point in 2025 where these walls are really being washed away. I don't think to most young viewers, certainly even young executives, I don't know if they really see YouTube versus traditional anymore. I think these lines are going to be pretty blurred. Yes, there's going to be, like I have, we have some team members who sometimes view things still in a silo. And I'm always trying to be like, no, you have to just drop that. Like that's not your insecurity. That's like your bias. I'm like, you have to think of the world as, there's no real difference anymore. Like traditional media, they made the investments, they pivoted. Look at Disney with Disney Plus. Look at Marvel. They have their own channel on YouTube with 20 million subscribers. So I'm like, you now have to drop this because you're just not understanding where the world is, right? So on the one hand, I think that is a thing. But the reality is, I think human beings, going back to, the ancient times, were always driven by insecurities. That is like a psychological thing that will never change. So I don't know if the cause of the insecurity will have changed. Like if a young creator is successful, do they care that they don't have a show on TV? I don't know. Maybe that the younger audiences really don't view that differently. But everybody is still managing or dealing with some insecurity, but it could be something else. Like, oh, I only have 10,000 subscribers. This other person is 15. So the insecurity is always a constant, but it's what is the cause of it and how do you manifest it? And I think, the most successful franchises, like we talk about podcasts, do they really wake up and go like, I need to produce content for Spotify? Or I need video for YouTube. No, you're just telling stories.
Mm-hmm.
Like people need to get the memo. You're just telling a story, and it's up to you as an intelligent storyteller to determine, is this an hour-long video? Is it a 10-minute video? Is this an article? Is this an Instagram? Is it a TikTok? Is it what you would have called a podcast? But it's all blurring into one, whether we like it or not.
So part of the title of this episode is Expos to Yankees. What does that mean with regards to WatchMojo?
So I was producing, when I was at Ask Men, a radio show on the Team 990, now TSN 690. I was a big Expos fan, big baseball fan. And, in 2003, it was clear they were leaving. And then I got kind of behind the scenes, reaching out to a lot of wealthy Montrealers and media companies. And at that point, there was no money from like all the streaming and IP and all the things that sports companies can do now. It was basically money from the gates, TV money to share, and the Expos were dead on arrival. But, that's kind of when my eyes opened that if you want to get any fucking thing done in life, like you can't go up to wealthy people and ask them to do stuff. They did not become wealthy by blowing their money on a stupid baseball team, basically. So I was like, hey, you got to put yourself in a position. And reluctantly, I was like, entrepreneurship is that path. So we'd always joke that like we started WatchMojo to bring back the Expos. Not false. That's true. Like there's articles I've written about that.
Very noble cause, by the way.
Very noble cause. But then I also realized like, okay, they're converting every freaking baseball diamond into a soccer pitch. And I love soccer, so I'm not blaming that. And baseball is like an old person sport. Now they've made some changes to make the game more fun to watch. But long story short, so we always kind of being in Montreal, we were a bit like the Expos, like we weren't the Yankees. We weren't like this company that raised $18 million, with each chair costing $5,000, even when you have 0 clients type of thing. So we were always more like the Expos, scrappy, getting the job done. To be fair, we were more competitive than the Expos. We were defeating. All of our competitors were like, WatchMojo's hustling. They would say this. They were like, Ash and his team are running laps around us. We're here like the big, fat, lazy, whatever analogy. This was their words, right? And I was like, okay, that's nice. But so around the time of reading the publisher and all this, I was like, you know what? I got a great team of soldiers. But I kind of not started to drink our own Kool-Aid. It was the opposite. I was like, maybe I and the team have gotten WatchMojo to this point. But if we're really going to be like MTV of our generation, if we're really going to be the ESPN, the SNL, whatever beacon of like successful brand that means a lot, generational, maybe my own insecurities and being humble, I was like, we got to go out and bring people who've worked at the Warner Medias and the Disneys and the crapsters of old legacy media. Boy, was I wrong. These were people that I viewed as my peer. I liked them personally, professionally. We would have good rapport when I'd be in New York or LA to talk about the industry. And it's not about them. Like, it's not about Dick, Tom, and Harry. Rich Antoniello, who started Complex, he wrote an article about, especially post-COVID, this entire generation of mid-senior level managers, where those jobs that in New York pay $250,000, $300,000 bases, cut it in half for cost of living. It's like somebody making 100 and change. It's not egregious at all, but it was this whole cottage industry of mid-senior level execs who would just manage things, brands, channels, other people. And partly with COVID, people working from home, like what was the role of a mid-level manager? And then media just starting to, losing out to tech and Google and Facebook, then starting to lay people off. It is true that whole class of executives have nowhere to go now. And again, I was always a bit ahead. So like 10 years ago, when I would meet these people who would leave the big ad agencies or would leave big media, I was like, okay, these people have experience and they could come and work with my, lieutenants and kind of develop them into the kinds of people who could then make WatchMojo. But as we see now, it's very hard. If somebody's worked for Warner, if somebody's worked for Disney, it has nothing to do with YouTube. Yeah. Sure, you could argue they're both media, it's ad supported, or there's a subscription model. Zero. And so these people, and we all have, I have a spiel, course to success, path to happiness, insecurities. And everybody has a story. It's our journey. It's normal, right? When you talk to your dad, he repeats a story. When you talk to your uncle, they have a story. Your college professor that you looked up to, they had a spiel. This is normal. We're storytellers, right? Sapiens. This is what separates us from the bears and the donkeys. We tell stories. But I realized, again, I was putting so much value on the stories these people would tell, but it was diminishing return. It was nothing that was like practically relevant to what we were doing. It was a very direct to consumer, very community driven. And these guys were just, again, I liked them. We stayed in touch, but they would be like, as if we were in an MBA class discussing, how people would launch a new magazine. And I was like, yeah, no, zero. This is not the way the world works. We're going the other direction.
So how did you end up structuring the company, and how did that change over the years?
Well, I mean, like I said, in 2016-17, we became the Yankees. All of a sudden, we had a chief operating officer, a chief marketing officer, a chief revenue officer. And what I realized was we didn't really need that. Like, they didn't really drive the kind of impact that I thought. And not because they weren't all-stars, but because we weren't running fucking MTV. We were running WatchMojo, a YouTube channel, and the way advertising. And I knew all this. I was like, advertising has changed, but I was like, oh, if we bring these people, maybe they could take their experience and apply it. What I realized is, people are not like that. People are actually like, this is what I do. That's like guitarists. Anybody, Zach Wilde sounds like Zach Wilde. He's not really going to be Slash, like Jimmy Page. You hear a riff, you're like, that's fucking Jimmy Page, And I think this was my mistake where I was like, oh, I'm going to take Jimmy Page and I'm going to put him in this weirdo, other kind of sound and style, and magic will happen. And I realized, no, it doesn't work like that. People don't like change.
How would you have done it differently if you could do it over again?
It's going to be a bit harsh. Again, balance, like I'm very open to feedback. Like, so I needed to just weed out a lot of, like, stop projecting that people have a clue. It sounds really harsh. And if you take this out of context, you're like, wow, what an asshole. Like, I really meet the homeless, unemployed, blind, deaf man. And I'm like, lead me to the promise. I'm like, you are, like, I am you. You are me. I'm no different, which is bullshit. Like, now I'm just like, it's fine. Everybody has their strength. For whatever reason, God gave me 3 skills, which involve building a business that tells stories and building distribution and monetization. I don't know how to sew. I don't know how to knit. I don't know how to play guitar, despite having a great guitar behind me. So I kind of realized that, hey, this guy had a successful fucking corporate career for 20 years because he played fucking politics right. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. Or like, this guy was really good at ad sales because he would just drink a fuck ton and be able to hold his liquor with other people who would then drink with him, and he got deals out of it. Like, I'm exaggerating, but I was like, there's no skill set here.
That's part of it. It's an exaggeration, but that's,
So I was like, stop projecting that. And this is an entrepreneur listening. Like, the answer is in your fucking head. The answer is in your gut. You should talk to people, but there's nobody off the street who's going to come in and build your business. And this is what I've learned. I'm always going to extend the table. I'm always going to open the door. There's an opportunity. But I kind of realize, and people hear me say this often, X person is not the problem nor the solution. They're just a tool, not that you're a tool, like as a not, like they're a tool. They're a means to an end. But so I was like, these people are not going to make us become MTV. And frankly, I was like, we don't fucking want to be MTV. We're WatchMojo. So let's play to our strengths,
Yeah. Fast forward to 2019, and you did the keynote at VidCon that year. Yeah. So at that moment, did you kind of feel like you had made it?
If we're going to be candid, there's the Expo.
There you go, with the Expo shirt.
The Expo shirt, yeah. If we're going to be candid, we always projected and punched above our weight. Like that article on TechCrunch, I wrote it, probably 2011 or so. We were not a successful business by any metric, but like writing being a columnist in TechCrunch made it seem like we were. And I really think like 2012, 13, when we like had finally broken even, I didn't need to be selling organs out of the back of my truck to keep the company afloat. And you know what I mean? Like once the company, I won't lie, was a going concern, I kind of felt like, okay, I'm in control of my destiny. And yeah, there's a lot to navigate with YouTube and fair use and a lot of bullshit and, employees that probably also were not meant to be 9-to-5 desk employees. But so I was like, I would say 2013, this was more, like I was more happy. I won't lie. I was more happy for the company, like the team. It's a bit like when Ernst & Young awarded us the Entrepreneurship of the Year. I always said it's a personal award, but it's a reflection of the company. Mm-hmm. I was really proud for the team because I knew what I was building. It was clear in my head. When I was like 5, I thought I was the fucking CEO of Iran. You know what I mean? Like I'm just always, when I was at RBC doing customer service as a low-level employee, ranked 12, the CEO, I think, is 72 in the echelon of corporate slavery. I walked around like I was the fucking CEO. You called complaining about your card being declined. I fucking fixed it. Like it was like I was responsible to shareholders, right? So I didn't need this stuff. This is hence the vanity theme. But I did think that there was a lot of teammates that we had that like couldn't even explain to their parents what the fuck is WatchMojo? Where do you work? What do you do? You're producing videos for the YouTube? Like, what is that? So yeah, like the Ernst & Young and the Vidcon stuff, I was like, hey, if you want to go tell your mom that like you work at a company where like your colleague, the CEO, is being asked to speak at Vidcon, it's validation for you. I don't need it. You know, and that's the confidence entrepreneurs have. We're delusional. Like I say some things and I'm like, not even the most delusional thing I've said today, but to others it sounds delusional. And when I kind of see other entrepreneurs say delusional things, I'm like, yeah, this guy, I'm like, we need to talk. This guy is this guy or gal. Like you need this kind of confidence, sadly.
Now in 2025, has your definition of success changed in any way since back then?
Well, going back like 15 years, I used to say success is three things: fluid, subjective, and relative. So success has to change. Like if your definition of success has not changed, you're a fucking moron. Not you, Rob. People. Yeah, I mean, I read the Kinko's. I don't want to take credit, and this was not planned, but since you asked, the Kinko's CEO, he was like, you know what success is? Success is when your kids, when they're older, want to be with you. You know,
That's very nice.
That's very nice. I get that. So to me, yeah, I won't lie. Success is being able to cook if I want to, take my dog for a walk. I mean, I work 7 days a week. You know, I don't care. You know, but success is just, to me, success is not dealing with fucking Oh, I don't want to use the R word. Somebody called me out on YouTube, on Twitter. That's fair. Success is not working with fucktards.
Much better. Great word. Much better word choice.
No, because I'll tell you what, you could have the R word, which I will not use, and I apologize, which is more like people who are sometimes slow, no vindictiveness. That's fine. I'm slow. If somebody explains neuroscience to me, I'm like, I don't get it. So moron is just somebody who's dumb. They're not slow. Like you could be successful. Fucktard is also people who just, you understand, are going to mess things up. There's either malice or vindictiveness or resentment or jealousy or just not good energy people. So success is, yeah, like if you don't have to work with people you don't enjoy, on projects you don't enjoy, that today is success, you know, like, you know, but yeah, success has to change. Like if your definition of success doesn't change, there's a problem. Where I think success is bad is that relative. People unfortunately look at their neighbor and they're like, oh, you got the 2025 you know, Homer Simpson car. I need to go buy the bigger. I think that's part of Western. I mean, even in crazy town, other parts of the world, people always look at I try to avoid that. But I do think that the fluidity of success is key, and the subjectiveness is whatever you think it is. But the relativism of success is not healthy, where you're looking at even like, you know, there are parts where I'm like, oh, I miss it in the 2010s meetings. But then I'm like, okay, there was a lot of spinning of the wheels for nothing. You know, now it's like my life, I don't need complexity. If people add complexity that is not healthy, I just shut them out. I'm like, here's the beauty. I don't have to deal with you. Like, I'm not better than you, but I've earned it. I don't have to work on this project. I don't need to do this.
Well, let's find out how our audience defines success with the poll that we left. So we wanted to know how do you know when you've made it? And I think unsurprisingly, 77% of people say you've made it when you're personally satisfied, which kind of echoes what you just said, Ash. Followed by 13% saying when you have the money. That's, you know, there's a subset of people for sure who are more concerned with that. And then 6% when you've got haters, and 3% say when you have fame and notoriety. So
look, the biggest fucking dishonest pieces of shit in the world are those who kind of are like, money's not important. Fuck you. Money's important when you don't have it. Like, let's just not be crazy here. Like, money's not important because of diminishing returns. Yeah, if you're a billionaire, that extra million doesn't matter, but it's so intellectually dishonest. I worked for a guy once who was like, we're all in the same boat. I'm like, bro, we're not in the same boat, but go on. Tell me how we're in the same boat. So yeah, that's part of it as well. But interesting. What percentage said it's the haters?
6%.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
That I refer to that as the Nickelback effect. When you know, when more people hate you than love you, I think you know that you've
So you play what instrument?
Guitar.
Guitar. So
Yeah.
you bring up Nickelback. So if you could, did you ever want to be a professional musician? Like somebody who earns money from playing?
Yeah, for sure. That was a big aspiration when I was younger.
So if you could have Nickelback's career
In a
meaning
heartbeat. In a
you're in
heartbeat.
yeah.
I
Could you-
actually respect them. I think that they're all great musicians. I think that they have a very formulaic style of writing, and they're corporate in that sense. They know how to structure songs for mass consumption. But I respect them as musicians and as business people for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I always, you may have heard me, like when we used to do especially more music lists, people were surprised, like, wow, Ash likes everything. He likes Taylor Swift. I'm not, these are great talent, but I'm like, I always go for what it is. I'm like, in that genre, that's how I, I don't, it's not the Aussie fan that's listening to Taylor, it's like as a pop fan, what is this good or bad? I agree with you. I think that is peak hypocrisy because any musician, sure, they might want to be, Jimi Hendrix or Prince, but most of them who are intellectually honest will be like, I would take Nickelbacks. But it's easy, citizen in the arena, to bash the Nickelbacks. But I'm like, at the end of the day,
Absolutely.
musicians, it's like, who are you to judge?
For sure. So next week, we will be talking about the COVID polycrisis, which is the era where I entered WatchMojo. And it was a weird time, to put it mildly. How did that go for
the COVID crisis? I mean, we'll talk about COVID. COVID was a batshit crazy. I'll never forget. I was in LA a month before. My birthday's March 12th. March 12th, 2020 is when they shut down. So I remember. I have a good memory. But February, I went to Ottawa for prime time, and it was like nobody really was talking about it. But then the week after, I went to LA, and I was in an Uber, and I just I coughed. I was like, and then the Uber driver, who turned out to be a Persian lady, and I told you my name is Ashkan in Western culture, but in Farsi it's Ashkan. So she was just like, Ashkan. I was like, oh God, it sounds like my mom. I'm like, yeah. She's like, have you been to China? And I was like, because the bat market or food market or whatever the origins were, and I remember going like, okay, if like this Uber lady is asking me about this is going to be big. And then I came back, and our then CFO, David, was like, Ashkan, we have to shut everything down. Everybody must go home. I was like, what? Anyway, and so we did. And then we'll talk about it next week because we obviously benefited from it, which I felt a bit guilty. But I was like, hey, everybody's like, what if YouTube shuts down? What if this? What if that? So, hey, what ended up happening was something that didn't really affect us in a bad way.
Very interesting series of events. So stay tuned for that next Thursday, same time, same place, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your time, as always, Ash.
Thank you. I have some voiceover to start recording soon for the documentary. I realized, shit, we're already in April.
Let's get it done.
I could get 2 hours of VO done in 30 minutes somehow.
Awesome. Great.
Awesome. Can't wait.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
And we'll see you guys all next week. Bye, everybody.
Cheers. Bye.